I'll try this again. So I don't really have a stand for my tablet. Let's see if that works. Try again. I know, I don't know if it's like, hey Wendy, I have my friend Jazz, she's coming on, and she is a teacher, professor of church history. So she's going to be giving us a little bit of a rundown of somebody of her choosing. Here she is again. Let's see if we can bring her on. Okay, I hope this works. Hopefully this one will work.
All right. How about now?
I can hear you.
And hi, friend.
Hi.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
Your face is like not in the thing or something. Hold on.
My face?
Or maybe it's just, I don't know if it's my view in my thing or what.
I don't know. I mean, I'm far away from my thing. I have this weird like eye infection. So I'm like,
oh no.
Well, you can't really see it anymore because I did antibiotics, but it's just like the remnants are still there. It's so stupid. It's from eczema.
Well, you know,
anyway.
Jazz, Ashley Armstrong, who was Rodaba, remember her?
Yeah.
So she had shingles, and when she was on here, and she was like, I have shingles, I'm going to have be covered in calamine. So
oh my God. You couldn't tell. I watched that one. She looked fine.
Yeah. She said afterwards her kids were like, why are you orange, Mom?
Oh my gosh. That's so bad.
Terrible.
Love her. Oh, and I got in touch with her. Thank you. I texted her. So when I move up there.
Yay, yeah. I'm so glad. Oh, that's right. Yeah, you're moving up that direction. So is it right to say that you're a church history professor or teacher?
Yeah,
or what?
Professor. I don't know. That's what I have my master's in is history. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to be teaching U.S. history, though, so I'm branching out a little.
Oh, okay.
So but yeah, history mostly.
I was trying to explain to the group how we met, which I think I figured out was 99. And your sister made, and then in comes Jasmine. And it's just funny. I was telling the group because, Maddie's so chill, and then there's Jasmine, who's
I know.
So likable. It's so fun.
My poor family.
No, it's awesome. You have such amazing vibrancy about you. It's so awesome.
Oh, thank you. You're the best.
Yeah. And so then we did a lot of stuff together because we worked together at the Bible College, and then we were on the worship team together at the hostel church takeover. We used to joke and call it the hostel church takeover.
I forgot about that. Oh my gosh.
I think Jasmine, I was telling you. What'd you say? You
played a mean djembe, Jen. I don't know if these people know that, but yeah.
I was talking to somebody in their leadership team about worship, and I was like, I think that's the first, I had led it a little bit in high school, but that was the first worship team I had been on, but we were all kind of new at it. I mean, you had been playing piano forever.
Well, but there were some awkward moments for sure.
You remember the guy who took over? He was so much louder than us. He sat in the front row. We would sing hymns, and he would take over I don't remember his name. He's an older, sweet man.
Yes. Oh, yeah. There's just people, they need the song, and you're trying to, catch up to them.
You're like, I guess we're going with your timing because you're louder than us, so the whole church is following you.
I totally forgot about that.
I was just telling you about that.
I remember the time we did This Is My Father's World, which I loved. It's one of my favorite hymns. And Dave Shirley got up afterwards, and he was just like, yeah, make us sound like a bunch of pantheists up here. I'm like, oh my gosh. Because that song, I don't know, this is I hear the Lord in the trees. And so I don't know. So Dave, and I'm like, oh. Anyways, so he shot me down right at the song I picked some heretical hymn. I'm like, geez. Anyway.
That's so
Dave.
Old Dave.
Yep.
So, okay, so you are you still right now serving at Calvary Costa Mesa?
No, I'm not anymore. So I I finished there in July when I finished grad school.
Okay.
Okay, I want to be a teacher more full time. I want to just go into, launch into that. And I wasn't going to do it, and I wasn't going to quit until I like had something lined up. But the Lord just kind of, I don't know, I was in a conversation with Cheryl and, Cheryl Broderson, who was my boss, the pastor's wife, for those who know. Anyways, and she just, I don't know, the way the conversation went, it was like the Lord was like, you're telling her now. And so I was just like, and I have nothing lined up, but I'm just leaving. So, and I knew it was time. It had been winding down for a while. It was like, I just need to move out. And so even though I didn't have anything lined up, so I was just searching for jobs since then. And then my best friend, Alina, she got married and moved to Kalispell, to Montana, like in October. And we had been living together for several years and stuff. So that was a big thing, a big transition, getting her all moved. And then, what was I going to say? Oh yeah. And so I went to visit in January, and that's when I heard about the school up there that I'm going to be teaching at. And so the Lord just totally opened that door. I would actually have been suspicious. Like, I don't want to go somewhere because my friend's there. That's ridiculous, but it was just the most wide open door, and, full time. I'm kind of going to be a dean of women, but there's a very small student body right now because they're in a transitional period. They're moving the campus from Billings to Kalispell. So they're in like kind of this, so there's a lot going on right now for them. And so they just need a few stable staff members who can teach and like fulfill whatever roles, So anyway, it was just really clear. So,
which is sort of what we did about, like, it's so common for ministry or nonprofit, they'll do like job description, and then at the very bottom they'll add like other roles as needed. So
yes, totally. I know. I could be just running a room. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and for those of you guys who know where she's going in Montana, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful place. I mean, the winters are intense, like, because it's Montana, but it's a just gorgeous place. And we also have some old friends from, not that they're old, but some people from the Bible college that live there. So Ashley, this group will know who Ashley is. So Ashley did a podcast with me a while ago. I'm trying to clean my camera because it looks fuzzy or something. But where is my camera?
Oh, it's okay.
There's my camera.
Oh, there.
Like, all black, But Ashley was on with us a little while ago, and she was telling us about Ukraine, because I knew she had a heart for Ukraine, and I wanted her perspective on what was going on. And so that led us to adopt a pastor she's involved with, Pastor Kosti, who's also a Calvary guy, this quarter. So all of our, like, we sell merchandise, our shirts and stuff, all of the money is going to Pastor Kosti this quarter. So Ashley's sort of temporarily helping us in leadership, and she's posting updates on Ukraine and stuff like that. So anyway, I'll like to tell the group, Jasmine is moving to the same city as Ashley, and Ashley's from there. So that's pretty cool. And then we all know each other.
And when I was the dean of women at the Bible college in Murrieta, Ashley was one of my dorm stewards, actually. So yeah, it was so weird to reconnect her. Yeah. So, and I know we had other people there, like Alyssa Militello, and there's other Montanans out. So
she's, I think, there too. I know there's other, she'll know everybody. She's the connected one. But it's a beautiful. Yeah, and so, Molly, as was Mortensen, she's out there, and I think some of her kids, I don't remember which of her kids live there in Washington, but they're all adults. They're all actual adults now. When we knew them, they're little kids, staff kids running around. So that'll be fun.
I love it. I'm gonna turn this up. There we go. Make sure. All right.
So
man.
So you're kind of in transition. You're moving to teach and do whatever else I need at that college in Montana. And then, so we know each other from the Bible college. We were friends, like friends of friends, and you were my roommate's best friend. So you were like our other.
Oh gosh, that's right. Yep.
So you were our other housemate, and then it was funny because you were over a lot, and then it was like, then you were working there, which was really neat because, like, well, you guys are going to hear when she starts sharing, but she's incredible with history, and so when we were both staff members there. At one point we were talking about Jasmine was doing, I don't know if it was Women in Church History or the missionary one. There's 2 classes you were teaching, but you had so many women that you were researching. It was like you had to find like this woman and do her whole life, and then give a 1-hour class on her, like, and then another, and you had all these women. And so at one point you gave some of the staff members an opportunity to do, like, you assigned us different women to do our own research and then share on them. And what's so funny about this is Jasmine assigned me Gladys Aylward, who was a missionary, Lillian Trasher, who was a missionary, and then Frances Ridley Havergal, who was she wrote the hymn Take My Life.
She might be Take My Life and Let It Be. Yeah.
Other things, but it was way before I ever thought of doing anything involved in missions. And then her parents were missionaries in the UK for how many years now? They came back.
They just came back. They were there for 20 years. Isn't that crazy? They're like citizens. My whole family is British citizens except me, which is so weird because we're American.
So can't get it though. Do you have enough connection or no to do dual citizenship?
No, it's because they all got it from living there. And then Maddie's married to a Scot. So yeah. So my sister is married to a Scottish guy. So yeah, to Martin. Who Jen knows as well. Jen's like part of the family. And seriously, Jen, when you like taught, just a little plug for Jen here, she's an amazing teacher too. I don't know if you've done any of that on this thing or if you just interview people, but I remember when you did Gladys Aylward, I was like, it was so good. Anyways, you just nailed her. Anyway.
Well, it's so crazy though is with Gladys Aylward, and I think I had talked a little bit about her in we have a women's Bible study on this group too, is so much of the stuff came back to me when I was on the field myself. And it was like, you didn't know, I don't know how you picked who you picked to give us to. You didn't necessarily know at the time, but God knew. And so many of those lessons were such just bolsters to me when I was actually out on the mission field dealing with culture.
Wow.
Different things. It was just so neat. And what was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah. So you're awesome. Dad's awesome. And so usually I would be asking people questions and kind of going back and forth, but I had asked Jasmine to share, just pick somebody to share on. Oh, real quick plug though. So can you talk about the podcast that you have up, just so that we have that on here?
Oh yeah. That is the one thing I'm still doing until I move. Mesa. Yeah, I decided to just keep, because I had to like do some little part-time things to kind of hold me over while I was job hunting. So I'm like teaching, like actually today, Tuesdays, I teach math and history for homeschool co-op, which is super fun. I'm totally gonna miss those kids. And then I was still teaching at the Bible College. I was driving out to Marietta, and then they just wrapped up 2 weeks ago. I'm gonna go one last time and take one last farewell walk on the campus.
I know there's so many of us.
It's so weird. Oh, I know. We have so many. I mean, yeah, and you're in like half of my memories there. I mean,
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it's really weird. But so yeah, I was doing that, and then the podcast I was continuing on. So right when COVID hit, my boss at the time, Cheryl Broderson, Pastor Brian Broderson's wife. So she called me and she was just like, hey, why don't we need to do something during COVID, because we were starting to realize this might go on for a little bit. She said, let's start a podcast, because she had vision for doing something with history and biographies and stuff for a while. But Cheryl, it's funny because she's so like throws ideas out there. You're like, well, yeah, like that'll happen. But she's like, no, we'll just meet at the studio next week and we'll start. And I was like, wait, what? We're just going to go, because, Calvary Chapel has like a radio station and they have all the gear for that. And so I was like, okay, what do we start with? And guess who we started with, Jen? Gladys Aylward.
Yeah, that's right. I went back and started listening from the beginning.
That was our first one. She's like the first one, I think a lot of people, if you know her story, she's the first one you think of because it's so unique and crazy.
Well, and so there was a lot of new stuff I had never heard of from you guys from your podcast. And I had read like 4 or 5 books on it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, geez. Well, maybe we made it up. Revisionist history, just like, and then, she was the first woman in space, and no, that didn't happen. Anyways. So, but anyway, so yeah, that kind of launched it. So it's just like every week we do just a little half-hour bio. Actually, we started doing, about a year in, we started doing 2-parters if it was people that, which is kind of unfortunate because I think we would have probably done more 2- and 3-parters to really get somebody's story fully told. But initially it began as just like little half-hour snippets,
Right.
And so it's called Women Worth Knowing. If anybody wants to go look it up. And we'll just we pre-record. So we'll just be going till I leave. We're gonna do tomorrow. I'm gonna talk about. It's my turn. I'm gonna do Sarah Edwards and Elizabeth Bunyan, John Bunyan's wife and Jonathan Edwards' wife.
Okay. Oh, that's
so
cool.
I'm gonna do that tomorrow. Yeah.
I
So
just listened to one on Isabel Kuhn, and that was like, there's something about these biographies that are so great because when there's somebody that you might recognize from a book or whatever, you already know about them a little bit. You have this way of thinking of like, they just appeared spiritual and amazing, and like they were born that way. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, totally. From the womb.
And they were amazing, you know. And it's like, no, they had their whole journey that brought them to that point, and that one was super surprising to me. Her backstory. And so I think that's why I loved being part of your class and these classes and the podcast, just listening to the podcast a lot too, because it's like these were ordinary people that served an extraordinary God. And I think if you get nothing from this stuff, that's what you pull from it. So it's very relatable, because even though, you know, a lot of these are, you know, you're telling stories from the 1800s or different times, it's still very relatable. And I think that's also kind of shocking too, is how relatable this is. And just like some of the struggles and different things. A lot of people in this group are single. And one thing I like about a lot of your stories is you're talking about how people met their spouses, and some of them are real crazy, you know, like, oh, they knew each other for months and, you know, whatever. And so that's really neat. And then this group is mostly women, but we do have more guys now. Danny, who's on, I think, watching, he's the kind of the founder. He started a TikTok that kind of gathered. He has the gift of bringing people together. So started this group. So then we're doing all these different things. But anyway, we could go on and on and on and talk forever. So I wanted to give you time to speak on whoever you chose to. I don't remember who you decided to, or if you, because I gave you that freedom.
I changed my mind. And
That's
so here's the thing is, it's hard because I have my computer with my notes on it. I can't just off the cuff tell a story, because I won't do it justice, and there's some good quotes.
You have
so is it right if I kind of over?
No, you're fine. And also, if anybody, well, you've studied so many people in their entire lives. I don't know how you keep it all straight. But if anybody who's watching has any questions for Jazz, feel free to post them and take a pause towards the end and ask the questions as well. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Yes, totally. I'll try to probably abbreviate a few of these things. I don't want to go on forever here. Okay, so I changed, Jen. I was going to do John and Betty Stam. And then because you were saying, because it's guys and gals. So let's do a guy and a gal, right? And then I was thinking, people of the spoon, kind of about meeting practical needs and stuff like that, and wanting to help. Like you said, you're supporting like pastors and missionaries and just doing different things. So I changed it up, and I thought I would do William and Catharine Booth instead.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Does anybody know out there, or Jen, you can just answer, I guess, why William and Catharine Booth are one of the most famous couples in church history? What did they do?
I'd love to know if anybody watching this knows who they are. I'll answer if not, but, and also if somebody can just comment, because there hasn't been a lot of comments, I want to make sure. Okay, Danny, thank you. I'm like, I want to make sure we're still live. Okay, does anybody know who William, what is it? William and Catharine are? And let's see, what would be a high charade? Let's see, what would be a hint? Because it'll let you know what they are. Names sound familiar.
Thrift store.
What'd you say?
Thrift store.
Thrift stores. Thrift stores. There are currently thrift stores around.
That's usually what we associate now. But it's not what it was originally.
With
what?
The thrift stores are what is usually associated with them. Oh, I know. Santa Claus at Christmas time.
Yes.
Army.
Yes, there it is. Cassandra for $500 if I had it. Very good. Yes, they were the founders of the Salvation Army. Very good. And as you will see, the Salvation Army is not just about Santa at Christmas and thrift stores. In fact, that's very much a secondary thing for what they actually were all about. So, okay. So, yes, William and Catharine Booth, actually, it's been said, no one family ever spread the gospel farther and more effectively in history than the Booths, which is really something, because all of their children, they had 8 children, and their children were all in ministry as well. Not all with the Salvation Army, but I mean, yeah, they're a pretty remarkable family. And so one biographer actually said, no religious movement has ever been more the product of a husband-wife team than the Salvation Army, which is all that's pretty cool as well. But the Lord did, call them individually as well. So I'm going to actually take them like one at a time and blend them. It's kind of hard to do that, but we'll start ladies first. So we'll start with Catherine. Okay. So Catherine Mumford, that was her maiden name. She was raised in a Christian home, and only out of 6 siblings, only she and her brother survived. Very common in the 1800s for that sort of thing. So Catherine's mom was a really big influence on her life. She was principled, overprotective, but also very loving and very spiritually minded. Catherine said with her mom, heaven seemed quite near instead of being a far off unreality. So Catherine had a very intense personality. She was very conscientious, very orderly. She loved the Bible. She had a very sensitive conscience. She was also because she was sensitive, she was really compassionate when she saw people in need. In fact, it was kind of funny because she was kind of shy, but she also had this strong sense of justice that she probably got from her dad, because he was a very zealous Christian who was really involved in the local temperance movement. This is when Prohibition was gearing up. It wasn't happening yet. This was pre-Prohibition, but it was at the time when women especially were calling for guys to stop drinking because there was so much abuse in the home, domestic abuse from alcohol. And so he was a big part of actually the temperance movement. And so she kind of got that crusader mentality from her dad. And so, like I said, even though she was shy, she would really jump out and get confrontational if she saw something being wrong. So if she saw somebody mistreating an animal, she would confront them. If she saw a drunk guy getting arrested by the police, she would go to his side for support and be there for him, I guess, kind of, because she felt bad that this guy was, anyways, in a bad way. So not very discerning necessarily, but she was young, and the Lord, the neat thing is, though, you see like the Lord kind of gearing her that way from the time she was little. And so it's kind of weird how the Lord hardwires us in some ways, in a certain way. And that was what he hardwired into her. One historian actually said that the Holy Spirit was fashioning her with a heart to meet the needs of outcast people, those to whom the Salvation Army ministered. Something of her compassion permeates the whole approach of the Salvationists. So the Salvation Army has her fingerprints really all over it. Actually made me think of Calvary Chapel, for anybody who's familiar with Calvary Chapel, because that really, that movement when it began really had the fingerprints of K. Smith as much as or more than Chuck initially, the pastor. So Catherine really gave her life to the Lord when she was 17, and somewhere around that time she wrote about her future husband, whoever he might be. She said, I made up my mind he must be a sincere Christian, not a nominal one or a mere church member, but truly converted to God. So she was not going to settle. And that's where William Booth will come into the picture. So they actually met through a mutual friend named Mr. Rabbits. I was like, that cannot be a real name, but I guess, yeah. Mr. Rabbits. Is that funny? I just learned that
person.
What?
Beatrice.
Like
sounds
a
like
what?
a Beatrix Potter character.
Oh, yeah. That's so funny. I love that. Yeah, it totally is. Mr. Rabbit. So he was bringing William to, he knew both of them, and he brought William to a Good Friday service, and Catherine was there too. And Catherine had some health problems, and so she wasn't feeling well by the end of the evening. So somebody said, hey, William, would you mind taking Catherine home? And so she wrote about that, ride in the carriage home. She said, that little journey will never be forgotten by either of us. We struck in at once in such wonderful harmony of view and aim and feeling on various matters that passed rapidly before us that it seemed as though we had intimately known and loved each other for years. And suddenly, after some temporary absence, we were brought together again. Before we reached my home, we both felt as though we had been made for each other. So that is very sweet. That doesn't happen very often. And so
MFEO, made for each other. That's so sweet.
Oh my gosh, MFEO. What is that, Sleepless in Seattle?
MFEO.
What is that from? Oh my gosh. No, it's totally so sweet though, because they really just, what?
I said it's so sweet though.
It is. They really connected, and it's neat because they were really like-minded, and as we'll see, they just really were on the same page. And they kind of needed to be, because what they did was really gnarly. Their ministry was super gnarly. They couldn't, if they were at odds, I don't know if it would have worked out. So they got married when they were both 26 in 1855. And they were just, you know, a dynamo couple. One biographer said both William and Catherine were intense, opinionated, strong-minded, determined. Both were frequently moody and prone to depression. And that's going to come up again later. So it's just like, man, lots going on here. One biographer said that Catherine never could have married a half-hearted man because she would have been too intense and intimidating. And so, I mean, she really was just in your face, but so was he. It's kind of funny. And like most women, she did have to fight against being bossy and nagging. William gently had to remind her many times not to be so inflexible in her opinions, because she just really could be. But she grew. In fact, one of the early kind of growing things for her happened kind of early in their relationship. It was before they got married. She was really pushing William to go to college and become a Congregationalist minister with the Congregationalist denomination. But he realized that he didn't really gel theologically with them. And so she got really upset. She was so determined. This is the course, you know, I know the plans I have for you, you know, basically. And so she got so mad at him for not doing what she wanted. But finally she let go because she realized, man, I am causing him to compromise his convictions and I'm being a little domineering and gross. So she backed off. So if you read their story, there's a great, one of my favorite books is 25 Surprising Marriages by William J. Peterson. I don't know when it came out, like in the 80s or something. And it has like all of these Christian couples and their stories. And it's great because it's a bunch of the stuff that you never hear about. Kind of like what Jen was saying, you know, you can get these thoughts that, oh, they're so holy. But if you look at their marriages, it's like, oh, dude, that's when it's like, you know, yeah, all the veneer comes off, you know, and you see what you really are. So anyways, their story's pretty funny. So where was I? Oh, yeah. So they ended up joining the Methodist Connection, which was kind of a new offshoot of the Methodist Church, but it was really revival driven. And they were really, I mean, they really were involved in a revival, I believe. So William became a circuit preacher. Then in 1856, they had their first of their 8 children, William Bramwell. He went by Bramwell, so he became pretty well known too. So William's in ministry, and Catherine finds herself being prompted by the Lord to start reaching out to the down and outers, like what she had done when she was a kid, you know, the old drunks and stuff like that. And so she just feels like she needs to start sharing the gospel with these people. And so she would sometimes skip out on church, even when William was preaching. She'd just miss church because she would get so caught up in speaking to like homeless women that she met on the way to church. So you know that's a God thing when you have that kind of a drive and you're so drawn to something like that, right? And so that would pave the way for the emphasis of their ministry later on the poor and the needy and stuff. William had that heart too, we'll see. So Katherine also eventually would begin a speaking ministry. William noticed that she was a really gifted communicator and counselor, and so he actually was the one who started encouraging her to lead women's Bible studies and give lectures. Even she started a door-to-door ministry, and she was partnering with William when they do their open air meetings. Like, you know, if you're just going to go stand on a street corner and share the gospel, she would kind of partner with him in that. And she actually had always been kind of an advocate for women preaching. She actually wrote a pamphlet called Female Ministry. And she said, if the word of God forbids female ministry, we would ask how it happens that so many of those most devoted handmaidens of the Lord have felt constrained by the Holy Spirit to exercise it. The word and the spirit cannot contradict each other. So it's like, wow, fair enough. So she went to the word. She's like, look, these women in the Bible were being used by God. So I don't know why we can't do that today. You know, Jesus is the same yesterday, today, forever. And so that actually, go ahead.
No, I was saying, yeah, that's cool. It's really cool that her husband was encouraging her in it too, as well. It wasn't like, it sounded like even though they were both strong personalities, it wasn't like a competition of, you know what I mean, ministry or gifts or something, you know, things like that.
Totally. He was not like all like threatened or weirded out by it at all. So that's I'm glad you mentioned that. That's really cool. So in fact, that whole premise kind of later became the basis of the Salvation Army's teaching on female ministry, like women in ministry. They were really known for that, like really being big on letting women go out and do stuff and really just serve in the community or, you know, sharing the gospel, whatever, at meetings. But, you know, it's interesting early on, even though she was supportive of women preaching and stuff, Catherine herself was very hesitant about public speaking or preaching personally herself, which is interesting. She was fine with other women doing it, but she didn't know how she felt personally. But William kept urging her to do that. Like, no, take opportunities. You should be speaking. And so the Lord began to put it strongly on her heart too. And so she finally said, okay, Lord, if you provide an opportunity, I will obey. So what happened was in 1860, during a church service, like in the middle of the service while William's preaching, the Lord suddenly prompted Catherine, like, you need to get up and share now. And she's like, oh, heck no. And so even though she had promised the Lord, yes, I'll do this, she was like, no. So she's having this whole internal battle with God. Like, I am not getting up there. There's no way. I'll look like an idiot. But then she, eventually realized, I don't know, she just realized, like, I need to obey. This is what the Lord's calling me to do. So he was kind of wrapping the message up. It wasn't like right in the middle or something. But she just basically got up and started walking toward the front, and he saw her coming and he thought, oh my gosh, is one of the children sick? What's wrong? Why are you doing this? And she just came up to him and she said, I'd like to have a word. And so he's like, okay, my wife would like to have a word, everybody. Remember, he's into this. So he's like, why not? And so she gets up and shares. And I mean, you could have heard a pin drop. Apparently, by the time she finished, people were in tears. It was so like clearly just a word from the Lord that William actually jumped up when she was done and said, hey guys, Catherine's going to preach at the evening service tonight too. So come on back again and hear her. So I just love that. I love that about him, kind of like what you're saying. He sensed the Holy Spirit was working. And so he just went with it. He wasn't like I said, he wasn't territorial or like on some kind of an ego thing. Like, oh no, this is my thing. It's like, no, hey, I want to encourage you, babe, go for it. So she actually became internationally famous. She was considered by many to be a better speaker than her husband. But what I love about Catherine was that she had genuine humility in all of this. And I think that's really important. There's kind of a difference, I think, when somebody's really called by God, there's more of a humility there than like, I am now a woman pastor, and I'm doing right. In fact, she wouldn't have called herself. Yeah. And she wouldn't have called herself that either. No, there was one time there was a group of laymen in the church, just like manual laborers. And they got together and they said, Catherine, we want to build a church for you to preach in, bigger and better than Spurgeon's Metropolitan Tabernacle in London. Like legit, they wanted to build something for her because, like I said, she was pretty well known as a speaker. She was, very powerful, but she just refused. She's like, no, that's not what this is about. Another time, a publisher wanted to print all of her messages because he felt like this is important. You need to preserve this. You need to, preserve your legacy. You need to, further your brand. No, I'm just kidding. They wouldn't have said that, but
yeah. Like,
I mean, really, that kind of idea.
Booth.com.org.
Yeah, totally. Get your app all set up for you.
Right, exactly.
But she refused. She's like, no, she really felt like that would be making it too much about her. She really just wanted to make sure this is for the furtherance of the gospel. Whoever hears me in the moment, and here's the word, that's who the Lord has this word for. And so she wanted to stay obedient to the Lord, submissive to his will. And she really made a point of staying under her husband's covering, as we would say, like I'm doing this because he is allowing me to stand here and, have his share the pulpit or whatever, so she didn't want to make it about her or any kind of competition at all. So, and of course, female preaching, that's a controversial issue, but, this is just what happened. And hey, God used her, so, and again, William was very supportive. In fact, later when they would write up the orders and regulations for the Salvation Army, he said that women shall have the right to an equal share with men in the work of publishing salvation. So pretty cool. And that became a distinctive. In fact, because Catherine stepped out in ministry as a woman, speaking, working with the poor, working with the needy, a lot of other young working class women in England felt empowered to go do the same thing, inspired to go do it. And a lot of single gals too, who weren't so they were just kind of like free to go. And they just felt so like encouraged, like, wow, this is opening up opportunities that I didn't even know I had as a woman. Right. It's hard for us because we don't know what life was like in the 1800s. You kind of have to put yourself back into that, kind of that limited sphere that women had. So, and the Lord used these women. I mean, you can't deny it, that they were used to spread the gospel. In fact, the Salvation Army came to America through a young teenage girl named Eliza Shirley, who came with her parents to America. They immigrated, and she and her mom just went out and started sharing like in a parking lot or something. And just God just did this work. So, I mean, it's really crazy when you see the early days, you see, wow, this was revival. The Lord was doing something here. So anyway, so that's kind of some of Catherine's side of it. Now, of course, then there's William, and the Lord obviously used him too. He was known as the prophet of the poor. For good reason. He was born in poverty himself. He started working at the age of 14 to sustain the family income, which is what people did. This was, again, mid-late 1800s. So we're talking Industrial Revolution. And most people, if you lived in a, you know, if you had moved off of your farms into the cities, you worked in factories and stuff like that. It was really hard. And so, you know, you'd have to really scrimp and save to make ends meet. The kids would usually all go out and start working in the factories from like the age of 9 or 10. David Livingston started working in the factory when he was 10 years old. Mary Slessor, they were all just little kids. And then if you happen to be, if you happen to be in a progressive town or in that had a progressive factory, the kids would be able to go to school afterwards. But that wasn't a guarantee, and definitely not where they were. I mean, this is down in like London. No, they're just exploiting the workers, and you know, they're not giving opportunity for anyone. So that's what he was doing.
This is kind of off subject, but is this sort of the same time period that Charles Dickens was writing about conditions because a lot of his, like, even though he's known for Carol and everything, a lot of what I love about him as an author is that he used his platform to talk about social injustices. So it just sounded kind of familiar. Talking about things like, and Nicholas Nickleby, he was talking about, you know, the boys' homes or like the places that I forget what they're called, or you know, in what's the other book? His main one, the one that's supposed to be about himself. He talks about children in factories and stuff. So that would have been that sounds like it's around the same time.
It totally is. This was all, yes. And Dickens was really important, like, for exposing some of that stuff. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this is all, that's the other thing too, is sometimes we don't realize who was contemporary with each other. I mean, all going on. You also have like the anti-slavery movement going. I mean, there's so much going on during this time, because this is right around the Civil War, you know? So, I mean, society was in upheaval, and God was really raising up Christians especially to meet these needs, these very practical needs, while also bringing the gospel. So, so when Booth was 15, you know, again, he's working in the factories. When he was 15, he got saved. He surrendered his life to the Lord, and said, God shall have all there is of William Booth. And he was really impacted by the Second Great Awakening in America, especially by this revivalist named Charles Finney. Some of you guys might have heard of Charles Finney. He was kind of the poster child for the Second Great Awakening at the end of the 1700s. Early.
Yeah.
What? Oh,
it sounds familiar. Sounds familiar.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah, you might have heard the name. And so he started kind of adapting some of those methods to his own evangelism. So William and his friends would go out, they'd hold open air meetings, they'd have songs, and then do little evangelistic messages, you know, calling for repentance. And then they'd go and do home visitation. They'd visit sick people, poor people, people that got saved, you know, follow-up counseling kind of thing. And so soon William's pastor suggested that he study for the ministry, because it's like, well, clearly you have a heart for this, and you're, you know, a gifted preacher. And so William became a Methodist pastor. But I mean, long story short, there were a lot of little petty jealousies. Some people were jealous of his influence, like how, you know, that the Lord was using him. And then there were some restraints put on him by the ministry. It just kind of got really frustrating.
Nowadays, right?
No, I've never heard of that. And surely you.
Ron,
so
Ron, who's from Michigan, he just made the comment: the Sunday school movement emerged at the same time.
Ooh, there's another fun fact. Yes, the Sunday school movement. That was, what was that guy? Rakes, I think his name was. And Hannah More was starting schools up in central England that became England's first public schools. So yeah, there was a lot of cool stuff going on. This is seriously, the 1800s are my favorite time in church history. I want to do, if I can someday, I'm going to do a whole class on just Christians in the 1800s. So, because it just, anyway, really neat. So anyway, so he's dealing with all that, you know, just that petty nonsense and everything. So by the time he and Catherine got married, they kind of just sensed that the Lord wanted them to step out in faith and just leave the Methodist Church. They didn't, they didn't go out like, shaking their fist, angry, but it's like, you know what? We just sense God's leading us a totally different direction, and we want to have more freedom. You guys have clearly your own plan, and we just sense the Lord wants to free this up. So they became, in 1861, they became itinerant evangelists around the UK. And then a few years later, they're basically just living by faith. And again, remember, they got kids. I mean, they're starting to have all these babies and stuff. So in 1865, William was preaching in East London, and he noticed just that this particular area was, totally abject poverty. It was so bad in this area. And so God really spoke to him at that moment and said, I want you to stay here. Like, no, they could still go out and preach in different areas and stuff, but he really sensed the Lord wanted them to put down roots in East London, in that just ghetto area. And so he William rented out a dance hall, and he and the new converts would clean up after the dancing on Saturday night. So like at midnight, after midnight, when the dance hall closed, they'd go in and clean it up, and then he'd come back Sunday morning and preach. And that became kind of just their little routine. And so that eventually, when they got more established, became known as the East London Mission, or the Christian Mission. And so, again, remembering that this is the Industrial Revolution, at that time, East London is where all the ships come in off the Thames, that have been out.
Located?
Sorry?
Isn't Docklands? Okay. So just for some context, so her parents lived and they had a cover chapel in Docklands. It's the same exact region. And if any of you watched the show, Call the Midwife, it's the same. That is the same region in London. So go ahead.
I've heard so many things about that show. I need to watch that, I think. So
different era, but same region.
Yeah. And East London was just a mess there, man. It was so ghetto. That's where, like, again, because all the ships would come in there and dock. That's why it's called the Docklands. And again, that's where my parents lived. My parents actually live in a converted mill. It was when they were there at Cumberland Mills. So it had been a former factory.
Yeah.
Yes, you did. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So
on the Thames.
they're across from the old power station. You can see still remnants of that time period. But it was so bad because, all the sailors are coming into port. And so they're looking for, liquor and prostitutes. And so, like, all just the seedy, nasty stuff. The East End is where Jack the Ripper was. It was just a really yucky part of town, to say the least.
Yeah.
Not a fuzzy. And so one biographer described it and said it was a squalid labyrinth with 500,000 people. Every fifth house was a gin shop, and most of them had special steps to help even the tiniest children reach the counter. So you've got drunk kids. I mean, it was just so chaotic. Oh. And again, and it's factories, mills, people crammed into tenement housing that couldn't sustain them. So there's like, sewage issues and sanitation and, homeless, poverty. I mean, everything, you name it, crime. I mean, it was all going on there. It was the armpit of London. And it was actually only in the last 30 years or so that they've actually gentrified and spruced it up. When the Olympics were in London in 2012, they were actually in East London, which was fun. I got to go to a couple events. Woo. Because I was there at the time. But that was partly why they chose East London, is because it was to kind of upgrade the infrastructure. That's what they do, is they put all that money from the Olympic Committee into that region to kind of better that part of town. So anyways, cool. So fun fact, Jasmine. Yeah. So that's what they did. And so now there's like this whole nice area there, and it's improved it. But anyways, my parents lived there, and they, my mom got followed home. Like some guy was trying to steal her purse. I mean, my dad almost thought he was going to get confronted by a gang of boys, and he was, they had all kinds of stuff happen to them anyway. But William's motto, getting back to the Booths, enough about Jasmine's family, sorry. William's motto was, go for souls and go for the worst. And I love he really lived that out. He's like, you go for souls and you go for the worst. You find the dregs of society. That's exactly what he did. And so he and Katherine, in spite of opposition, oppression, you've got, obviously, of course, spiritual warfare, all of that going on. They went out there anyway. One biographer said, this delicate, ill-educated man, married to a very sick woman, stood by himself on Mile End Waste and was pelted with garbage by the drunkards who reeled out of their gin palaces to deride and mock them. Mile End is still an area there. There's actually a William and Catharine Booth. I think there's like a university or a school or something in their honor there in that part of East London. But actually, I want to circle back to their health there, because it mentioned that they were pretty ill. They had so many issues. At one point, Catherine had this gnarly battle with dysentery, which is like gnarly runs, in case anybody's wondering what dysentery is. It's like, it can kill you. It's that bad. William had recurrent bouts of typhoid that almost killed him.
Typhoid fever.
Catherine had, sorry?
Typhoid fever, right?
Yeah, typhoid fever. And it kept coming back. And then Catherine had recurring spinal problems. He was always in pain from chronic stomach ulcers. So they didn't just have like one disease. I mean, they had chronic things they were struggling with since their 20s. And so, I mean, the fact that it would, just in spite of that, keep going. It's just like, whoa, man. I just feel like every time I read about these people, we are such wusses nowadays. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm complaining about my little eye thing. Oh, am I okay? You know, it's like, oh my gosh.
Well, and I think that's so beautiful, because there's so many people who have chronic issues that they deal with. We have at least one of our members in our leadership team deals with chronic illness, and it's just different than, oh, you know, I went through a surgery and now I'm good and I go through rehab and I'm fine. It's because it's never ending. It's every day, and it's exhausting. Yeah. But it's beautiful to see an example of a couple who had multiple chronic issues, and it didn't.
Yes.
Not that you should run yourself into the ground physically if you have chronic issues. That's not what I'm saying, but that it didn't stop them from still serving God and doing what they were.
Yeah, strength made perfect in weakness. No, totally. I mean, and I was, engaged to Darren, and Darren, had chronic. That's a whole other story. We'll do that another time.
I just shared that song from them, the one about sturdy feet. That's my favorite love song that his band sang. The band he was in, the Dance Floor Prophets.
Oh, yes.
Right?
No.
Am I getting?
Oh gosh, Darren? No. He wasn't with that. No, he was with the swing band. It was different.
Oh, maybe I was getting him confused.
With Dance Floor Prophets? Wait, he was with Dance Floor Prophets.
He was. I'm pretty sure he was, because we had mutual friends at the time.
Yes, and we do. Yes, Diane lady.
Yeah, Diane. Yeah. So anyway, man, we got so sidetracked. Anyway,
sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I totally forgot time with them. Okay. All right. Anyway, so in these health issues, everybody's like, will you please get back to the story? We don't need to talk about Jasmine's ex-fiance. Okay. So in the midst of these issues, not to mention, remember, they're also dealing with, they have children, financial problems. So they have a lot of things, that could be seen as, things against that, or difficulties, right? Catherine and William both started to struggle with depression at different times. I don't think it was at the same time, but they, were dealing with that as well. And I love the openness and vulnerability in her writing about this. Charles Spurgeon also was pretty open about his depression. And this kind of goes back to Jen's point at the beginning, that this stuff is relevant. This isn't like these people are so different than, they're human like we are, so. But she said this, and I was like, wow, she's just so honest. She said, I know I ought not to be depressed, and I know it dishonors the Lord, but I can't help it. I've struggled hard, more than anyone knows, for a long time against it. And then later she said, my soul seems dumb before the Lord. A horror of great darkness comes over me at times. But in the midst of it all, I believe he will do all things well. And, this must have been so hard too. This was a time before clinical depression could be diagnosed, or that there were any kind of the modern tools that we have. Right. But it does go to show that God is greater, that as deep as we may sink, we always know that underneath are the everlasting arms, like it says in Deuteronomy 33, right? Yeah. Underneath are the you can never go so low that God is not under you. If you read the story of Adoniram Judge, a very similar, dark, crazy season of depression.
Well, and I think Martin Luther also dealt with depression, right? And there's multiples of us in this group that deal with depression. I'm one of those people, and it is hard to explain when you're in it, versus when you're not, because for me, I have dips and stuff like that, and there's multiple people in this group that deal with the same thing. But wow. Yeah, I remember, I specifically remember you talking about years ago about Martin Luther and as well. And I think part of when you're in depression, you feel like I'm never going to do anything of worth, and you think of all these people that dealt with it. It was like the thorn in their flesh in a way, and they still like how much they really brought to God's kingdom.
Yes. And in a way, I feel like it makes you, and I learned this through Darren too, like there's a depth that can't come any other way than by some kind of suffering. Maybe it's not depression, or maybe it is,
Yeah.
it could be anxiety. There's something that comes from that is so powerful. It's, what's that? Isn't it Elizabeth Elliot? Somebody said like, if you suffer greatly, you get used greatly, or something like that. I can't remember who said it.
Yeah, you
like
would know better, but I don't know how you keep everybody straight.
Jen, help! I don't know. Yeah.
Someone feel free to Google that who's watching.
Yeah. Oh, it's something to that effect. And it's, and it might be in a different way than you would ever expect. I mean, think of Amy Carmichael when she was an invalid for 20 years. She couldn't go out and do what you would have expected, and, help with her kids at the orphanage. She had to just write books. But those books were so fruitful, and they really ministered to me. Aaron and I broke up, was trying to understand people with chronic illness and what they're going through.
Right.
So
exactly.
it's really powerful. And the Lord did, like with these guys, I mean, like I said, underneath are the everlasting arms. It's just such a truth that she really, I think, really took to heart with those overwhelming emotions. And, she took them back to the cross. So, again, in spite of all of these health issues, struggles, everything they were going through, William was just so compelled to go on. He said to Katherine, "I seem to hear a voice sounding in my ears. Where can you go and find such heathen as these? And where is there so great a need for your labors?" In fact, one time he took Bramwell, their oldest son, when he was still just a little boy. And this is something I think very many parents would do nowadays, but he would take him with him when he'd go do his, out in the seedy part of town. We're going to go and minister to people. And it's like, oh my gosh. He was watching him the whole time, but he's like holding Bramwell, and he's like, "Bramwell, these are our people. Like, don't you love them?" He just had such a heart for just the people nobody wanted anything to do with, And so William really believed that practical ministry was, that's what would greatly aid in the work of salvation among the lower classes, these down and outers. And a lot of these people, they were bitter. They were hardened by life done them wrong, And so he just felt like if I help them practically, it'll open a door for salvation, for the gospel, because that was always his aim, was the gospel. I'll circle back to that in a minute. As he put it, he said, we go by the 3 S's: soup, soap, and salvation. So we give them food, we clean them, and then we get them saved.
That's awesome.
So I know, I love it. Soup, soap, salvation. So one of my favorite examples of their practical ministry had to do with a major health concern for girls that were working in match factories, because matches, I don't know if they are anymore, but they used to be made with phosphorus. And so a lot of girls in the match factories started to develop this condition called phossy jaw, because nobody knew at the time that phosphorus was such a toxic chemical. And so while they're working in the factory, they're breathing in phosphorus. It actually was lodging itself in their jaws. And so these girls started to have eroding jaws. If you look at pictures on the internet of phossy jaw, it is so gross and gnarly. So their whole jawline would be eaten, and they get all disfigured. Their mouth would be like literally you'd see their teeth over here. Like it was just so disfigured, horrific what it was doing to these girls. And so Booth, I love this. He started establishing phosphorus-free match factories. He wanted them to still have the dignity of labor and to work, but in a safe environment with good wages where they were going to be taken care of instead of exploited. Because, when you look at other things, like if maybe you guys have heard of like the Radium Girls and some of this other garbage that went on where, where the owners knew what was going on and they're like, don't worry about it. And so you've got all these radioactive girls. It was so bad. So he just went and practically met a need there and then used that as a door to share the gospel with these girls. Another cool thing that the Booths did was they were ministering, of course, to homeless girls, trying to rescue them from becoming prostitutes. One year, Bramwell wrote up a report about the conditions that these girls were living in, and then Katherine took that report and went before 2 successive prime ministers to petition for legislation to protect these girls. And so this resulted, eventually it resulted in the Criminal Law Amendment Act, which protected girls from being recruited into prostitution. It put a protection on children under 17. And this is huge. It made it a crime for men to solicit women, which in that era, I mean, I know this is the Victorian era when everybody was prim and proper, but a lot of that was on the outside. And the upper class men were just exploiting the, you know, poor women and the prostitutes all the time. And so it made them both men and women equal under law. So, I mean, this was just huge if you think about the time that it happened. So the mission was growing leaps and bounds. Sorry, I'm almost done. I'm getting there. I hope that's okay. We started
late, so it's okay. So interesting. It's hard to stop.
I know, right? I'm like, all right. So the mission was really expanding. Within 10 years, they had 1,000 volunteers and evangelists. By 1870, they had preaching stations, ragged schools. Those were actually started by another amazing Christian man named Lord Shaftesbury. I love him, to kind of provide education for for poor kids, working class kids. Penny banks, soup kitchens, relief of the destitute and sick poor. They started a magazine called The War Cry. And then in 1878, they were having a kind of a vision meeting and trying to define what their mission was all about. Because remember, at this time, it's still called East London Mission. Kind of boring. And somebody said, we're like a volunteer army. And William thought about it and he said, no, we're a Salvation Army. And so that's where it came from. And then later that year, he said, we are sent to war. We are not sent to minister to a congregation and be content if we keep things going. We're sent to make war and stop short of nothing but the subjugation of the world to the sway of the Lord Jesus. I mean, he was just like, you know, come hell or high water, we're going to keep doing this for the Lord. And so with that vision of a Salvation Army, they adopted a flag, a crest, they even had a uniform, and everybody had to wear the uniform so that there weren't any class distinctions. And that was another really key thing they did. They were trying to avoid anybody, oh, are you upper class or are you poor? It's like, nope, we're all the same. We're all one in Christ. I know, isn't that neat? And so it all just
had a uniform. I mean, I know it was kind of went with the theme of what they were doing, but I always wondered what the purpose of it was.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really, very clever. And so, you know, basically the Salvation Army went viral in our terms today. And within 10 years, it was all over Europe, also in Canada and the United States, like I said, through that one like teenage girl and her mom. And so it's active still in over 100 countries, which is pretty amazing. And it's a church, you know, it is a church as well as a ministry. My Spanish professor in college, this is so funny. Her last name was Doctor. So she was Doctor. But she was a general in the Salvation Army. So she was in the Salvation Army Church. She was very involved. So, but they were unique for many reasons. They used marching bands because march band music, if you guys have heard of John Philip Sousa, you know, these marches were really popular in the, late 1800s, early 1900s. So they do marching bands to draw a crowd to church. You know, while they walk to church, they're like marching along. And then they had very, robust, I guess, evangelistic outreaches. They had a broad appeal to various Christian groups and, like I said, social classes. They didn't care about denomination. For instance, William and Catharine, they were very convinced Methodists, but they still really appreciated Spurgeon's ministry as a Calvinist. So they linked arms with everybody.
That's so cool.
Catharine, I know, and Catherine's speaking ministry even allowed her to connect with some Catholics that were like-minded. And so, but it's really cool because, and this is important because at that time, you also have the social gospel and Christian Marxism trying to sneak into the church where we fix society's problems and salvation isn't enough. All right. So that's kind of, kind of the premise there. And so kind of in contrast to that, the Booths were really focused on the gospel and made sure that was their hallmark. That was the center of everything they did. And that's really, really important. That actually, I mean, that could open a whole can of worms for where we are today with social justice and stuff. And people like,
I've had people accuse me of moving forward a social gospel because of addressing social issue things. And I'm like, I mean, a lot from your classes and things like that, from church history myself, you're like, I mean, even in missions, they talk about felt need versus seen need. So like, you might know they need the gospel, but they don't see the need. So their need is food, housing, whatever. And so you are the hands and feet of Christ, which is very much this group and the vision of this group. You're the hands and feet of Christ. and also bringing the gospel. But I know what you mean in terms of like, because there's actually some, I was reading a really, really good book called, I think it's Let the Poor Be Glad. And they were talking about these movements within church history, how like people would go, like where orphanages and hospitals were all church run things. And then when welfare came in, it was sort of like that was abdicated to the federal government. And then people went the other way and were like, well, it's only the gospel that matters, not the practical stuff. But like even the Bible talks about like you can't be like be warm, be filled. You know what I mean? So that's something that's still an issue today, because like Calvary Marietta, they have a very strong justice kind of ministry thing. But you would get that flack from people of like, well, you know, are you doing this, this, and this? And it's like, you have to be in these people's lives at their point of need in order to even have any kind of relational authority. But yes, you shouldn't be doing only the practical and leaving Christ out. Like you have to have that balance, you know?
Yes. Excellent. That is so good. Yeah. Felt need and seen need. That's totally, exactly. That's the whole ticket there. And so, yeah. And maybe that's what some people don't understand is like the social gospel was inspired by like Marxism. It wasn't Marxist because it wasn't atheist, but it was a totally different angle. Like that was all. And because that was their whole point was like, ignore salvation because these people have problems. We need to meet just those needs. It's like, okay, that's totally different, you know, than trying to do both, you know, to open a door. I think that's such a good point because the Booths were trying to open a door for the gospel.
Exactly. And even Christ did that. I mean, like he fed people, healed people. Those were their felt needs. He knew what they needed was salvation.
Yes.
That was the most important thing, but he didn't ignore those other needs. And he also spoke pretty boldly, like speaking of this couple and how bold they were, he spoke pretty boldly against the people that were exploiting others. You know, you think of turning of the tables, that was exploitation. That was why he was so angry, because it was exploiting people in the name of God, you know. And then also how firm he was. A lot of us in here watched the Chosen show, and how firm he was with the Pharisees, not because he was just being a jerk, but because again, they were, you know, it's like the Bible talks about putting burdens on people that you yourself can't even carry, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so for me personally, and because of a lot of the work that I've been involved in overseas, has been community development, you know, kind of focus and things. Like I get pretty passionate about it because it's like, oh, we're to be like Christ. He did this. And if you see somebody and they have a need and you have the ability to fill it or help them or create livelihood and stuff like that, you know, for sure.
Amen.
It's an either or thing, but it has to be done in a balance, like anything, you know.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. It's not either or. It's both. Yeah, exactly. It's, I love that. That's good. Dang, Jen, nailed it. So yeah, so that's why the Salvation Army was so effective. The social gospel died because it didn't address the soul, you know, but these guys, it lasted because for a long time, it was strictly a ministry organization because they met the soup and soap, and then the salvation, right? They did all of it. It was holistic. And so it was, you know, so powerful, and the Lord used them so much. In fact, they inspired, this is kind of a random connection. I've just never really thought about this before, but they inspired Amy Semple McPherson, who was a little bit crazy, the Foursquare denomination. But that's what Calvary Chapel came out. Pastor Chuck came out of Foursquare.
Right.
So it's Foursquare. But she came out of Salvation Army. So, I mean, it's all like linked. It's really interesting if you follow those threads. So,
impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So Katherine died after a battle with terminal cancer, October of 1890. One writer said Catherine Booth, William's little wife, mother of his 8 beauties, mother of the Salvation Army, mother of nations, has gone home. She faced the last enemy and proved in life and death, God is enough for us. So William carried on. He went blind later in life, died in 1912. So he lived another 20 years. The Queen attended his funeral. King George V wrote to Bramwell, the nation has lost a great organizer and the poor have lost a wholehearted and sincere friend. And then President William Taft, that was who was in office at the time, he said Booth's long life and great talents were dedicated to the noble work of helping the poor and weak and giving them another chance to attain success and happiness. But it's cool because, you know, obviously for the Booths, it wasn't really about those kind of accolades. It's neat that they were this is the impact they made. I mean, that the whole nation
Right.
mourned their loss. But, they only cared about, bringing Jesus to those who were desperately lost, in practical and spiritual ways, whatever they could do. William said, I love this quote, "While women weep as they do now, I'll fight. While little children go hungry, I'll fight. While there is a drunkard left, while there's a poor lost girl on the streets, where there remains one dark soul without the light of God, I'll fight. I'll fight to the very end." So that was their heart. So that
legacy.
is Booth.
Like, this is sort of a personal question, but like, from you study so many people and you have so many probably snippets of people's lives in your head, but like, for you yourself, what do you feel like is the biggest takeaway from them? Just for you
From the
personally.
Booth?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I love that. I love that they acted on it. I feel like that challenges me. I mean, I went and helped out in a soup kitchen a couple months ago, and I'm like, man, it was kind of like, man, this is kind of, I'm looking at these people that do this week in and week out and stuff, and I'm like, man, I just appreciate the practical that they did both. They brought the gospel, but they also met the needs. And, I just feel like there's so, in this day, in our day, it's all like about like social media posts and like, here I am kind of like posture, take care of the needy, but it's people that aren't actually out doing anything. I just have a hard time. I've come to a point where I kind of have a hard time respecting people who don't go out and do it. If they're going to be like telling oh yeah, we need to take care of, whatever, all of these needs, the homeless. It's like, are you doing anything in the community then? I mean, and I'm not, I mean, obviously for me, maybe that's why I don't post on social media, because I don't want to be a hypocrite, right? But I want to, I mean, and even sharing the gospel too. Like Alina, that's why I miss her. Maybe we'll get to go do this someday again in Montana. But we used to go street witnessing, like just randomly on a Saturday or something like that. Let's just go to the beach and share the gospel with people, because I feel like, I want to act on things. It's hard when you're a teacher because you can talk and tell everybody, go do stuff, guys. But I want to be more actor on what I know and, living it out. They just lived it out so beautifully. Yeah. So anyway, that's one thing.
That's wonderful. That's so true, because it's also a different level of authority, I think, when you're teaching, whatever you're teaching, whether you're teaching from the Bible or on a subject, like, it's a different level of experiential authority that you have when you're like, hey, I did this, or here's an example of how you can accomplish or do kind of the same thing, or because you're inspiring people to get out there and be the change you want to see, I guess.
My God.
I know that's.
I love it. No, but Jen,
sometimes good sayings are just good sayings,
They just are. And Jen, you have always done that. You've always modeled that. And so, not to embarrass you or anything here, but I just really respect that. I've always respected, what you did and stuff like that, or are doing now. But I just remember when you were in, like, just in these different countries and, like, just doing where was it that you were doing, you were helping them make, like, you were doing, like, what was it called? What's it called? Not free market, fair, what?
Oh, fair trade.
It's like fair trade.
Yeah,
you were doing fair trade product.
That actually. So my friends in Kosovo and the Philippines, I started a couple projects. So this is actually one of their laces that they.
Hey.
This is Kosovo. These earrings, though, it's funny. I have to do something different to them, because if you wear them, they go this way. So it didn't. So there's always these little things that you learn when trying to do projects of, like, quality control and design mess ups and stuff. So, but yeah, I think just helping people recognize what is a skill that they have, because it started off I've been making jewelry since I was like 14. I had this great aunt who wore like huge crazy stuff, and she was like, oh, Jen's crafty, I'll just send stuff to her that I don't want to wear anymore or is broken. And I would not wear the huge crazy thing, so I would adjust it to fit what I would want to wear. And so I started making jewelry as a kid. I was like, probably 13 or 14. And then when I was overseas in the Philippines, just seeing this extreme poverty, it's more extreme than you usually will see here, because they don't maybe have the systems we have in place and different stuff. And it was like, and I'm thinking, I didn't really know what I could do, but I knew there was jewelry materials there, because in like their Chinatown, they have all this stuff. And then we were working with a group of people who were known for being pearl divers and pearl sellers, but they were selling huge strands of like $50 to $100 pearls to tourists. And I was just like, I know people who would want to buy handmade stuff back home, but they're not going to buy a $50 to $100, like, because pearls weren't really in at the time, you know, like strands of pearls. And so the same ladies, I asked the village chief, like, can I just teach him how to make jewelry? And he didn't want to compete with the pearls. So he was like, as long as they're not pearl jewelry, you can do whatever. I don't care. So they weren't pearls, but so we did. So I taught a group of ladies how to just make earrings and sold them back in the States. And I think I'm finally out of all that inventory, but it was so amazing what God did with it, because a lot of them literally could not feed their families. They were having such a hard time feeding their families, but they needed something they could eat from home. And so for me, purchasing it allowed them to buy rice, you know, and just such basic things that you're just like, it's just crazy. And then now all of those ladies, like, it's still, sometimes it bums me out that we couldn't, because I was living over there, so it was hard to, and it was really before a lot of internet sales and stuff was happening, and so it was hard to kind of pivot it into a full-time business. But it, like, they did learn how, they learned a skill, they learned how to do a skill with their local resources, and I was teaching them about the fair trade wages in terms of, like, your time is worth something, because in a lot of poor environments, the time of a person has absolutely no respect given to it. So, like, they might be paid a wage, like the typical wage in the Philippines was like, for like someone who doesn't have, you know, education, was like $2 a day for working 9-10 hours a day in the heat, like DVD stall or whatever. And so they could make that in a lot quicker with some of the stuff they were making for me, and they were doing it from home. So if they had babies and stuff, they were still taking care of them. So that was sort of how, like, learning about fair trade. Fair trade is also controversial, but basically the whole concept is paying somebody a fair wage as opposed to just exploiting them. That's the heart of it. And also trying to use, like, what's a skill they already have and the resources they already have, and then, you know, selling it over here. So yeah, I love it. Like, I'm crafty, but I would never attempt this. It's teeny tiny. Crocheting. So,
come on, Jen. Remember we used to always say that, like, Jen could make a wall hanging out of a paper clip, or like whatever you could do. Like,
I think the first time I met, it was like Kelly Cutie and Brandy and stuff. I was working in their office, and I'm such a weird homeschool kid. You're homeschooled, so I can say this, but I was like, oh, look at all this paper going to waste. I'm gonna melt it down and, like, make my own paper. And so then they called me Paper Jen for years.
Paper Jen.
They were like, who does that? But I used it later. My weird crafting, even when there's nothing.
That's right. It was redeemed. Someday I'm going to share about you on Women Worth Knowing. That's right. Dude, I wish you lived here. What?
I know. Well, I do want to come visit. I have a couple invitations to come to Montana. So, and I almost moved to Montana multiple times. I love Montana.
Whoa, I didn't know that. Okay.
I used to visit. That was where I used to go on vacation every year. But what was I going to say? Oh, just to wrap up, because we could go on forever. But it was okay. This is about what I was expecting, because we got a late start. We've been having a lot of technical difficulties. So, so the podcast is Women Worth Knowing, and it's on Google and Apple, I think, right? And it's like pink. The thing looks pink, and it has a little microphone.
Like, I can't show you because I'm on my phone right now. Yeah. It's like a little.
I think I'm gonna
if you type in my name, I'm the only Jasmine Alnutt in America, so you'll find me from that.
Yeah, it looks, I don't know if you can't really see it. It looks like, no, my light's too bright. But yeah, it says Cheryl Broderson, Jasmine Alnutt. It's so good. There's, I don't know how many episodes you have now. So many, because I have to scroll way, way, way down to get where I'm caught up, you know.
Oh gosh, yeah, I don't know. We're like in the hundreds.
April 2020, every week. It's a podcast.
Yeah.
It's Women Worth Knowing. It's so good, and it's Cheryl and Jazz. So they kind of like tag team it. So like one day will be Cheryl talking about somebody, one day will be Jazz talking about somebody, and it's so good and it's so inspiring, and it's all women. I mean, the men that are in this group, you can also listen to it, because these are.
I have friends,
you know,
I have friends who are like, oh, it was really good because it's not weird. It's not girly. We're not like talking about like PMS and, you know, weird, you know, we're not getting all awkward, like, oh, women going to, you know, anyways, it's just the story. So, and a lot of times, yes. And sometimes there's men involved if they're married, you know, we give shout outs to the men.
Yeah.
Brian, I mean, honestly, Cheryl's husband, Brian, is like our biggest fan. He's like always promoting the podcast and like, you got to hear this one, guys. I'm like, oh, anyway. Yeah. So
it's so good. And Jazz, you have such a gift of being able to really humanize people. Like, that's one thing I loved about listening. I think at one point I had your class on CD, and it's just the human side of these people and how God used the ordinary for extraordinary things. And it's so neat. And so one more thing is, I don't know if Danny is still watching. I think it kind of goes back and forth how many people watch, and then people often will watch after, because if depending on their time zone and stuff, because we have people from all over, but
that's awesome.
and a couple international folks too. But so we always have to say, if you watch later, please put a comment so we know that you watched later. And in the comments once this posts, it's kind of late. He's got a test tomorrow. But sometimes he prays us out if it doesn't go too late. But he's got a big CDO test tomorrow. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So if you watch it later, please comment. This is gonna also be on YouTube so that you can share it publicly as well. I'm gonna get it up on probably in the next couple days on our YouTube channel. If you guys don't know, we have a YouTube channel. We're trying to work on getting some of the stuff from here over there because this is a private group so people can share it publicly. But Jasmine, we always ask at the end, what is something we could be praying for you for?
Ooh, yeah. Well, my move for sure, just that I'll be able to tie up all the loose ends, and because I'm here for 2 weeks, and then I'm going to go see my sister in Scotland for 3 weeks, and her and Martin. What? Yeah, I know, right? No big deal.
Oh my gosh, the kids are so huge, right? No. They've got to be so old now. The last time I was there was like 2005.
Yeah, 14 and Luke's about to turn 17, so I'm going to go for his birthday.
2015.
Wait, you were there? No, you were there for.
No,
yeah, you were there more than that.
Yeah, not 2005. I left the Bible college in 2015. I think it must have been. 2015.
Yeah, they were. Yeah. I remember that. So yeah,
17.
I know, it's pretty wild. So yeah. It's so, I know I'm so old Auntie Jazz, so Auntie Jazzy. So I'm ahead of her. So I have to go there. I'm going there for 3 weeks. And then when I get back, I don't know, because I got hired like after I'd made those plans. And so when I get back, I have about 2 to 3 weeks to pack everything up and just get going off to Montana at the beginning of July. So just for, the Lord's great. What?
You're just driving? You'll be driving.
Yeah, and my parents, because they're in Yuma now, because they're in Arizona, they're going to come over and help and drive up too. They'll drive their car, so I have a second vehicle, which, I think Alina's going to take advantage of that. She's having me pick up some lamps for her, and, you're taking 2 cars? So, yeah. Anyways, so, no, I'm happy to do that. But anyways, just that it'll all kind of come together, and, yeah.
So when will that actually
When do I actually move?
Uh-huh.
He didn't give me a firm date, but I'm going probably after 4th of July. So whatever, like in that next week or so, from there. Okay. So I got to get out there roughly beginning July.
So we can be praying for you for your move and just wrapping up in your trip and stuff. So definitely say hi to Matt and the kiddos for me.
I will.
And you said you're teaching American history next semester?
I'll be doing U.S. history, math, which is random, and then some other kind of possible biography-related class. He hasn't figured out what it's, because he's having to rework he wants me to teach church history because that's my passion. But right now he's kind of having to streamline some stuff, and that's fine. I'm happy to, work on that. I've learned a lot about U.S. history. It'll be good for me, a nice little challenge. So,
well, I was going to say when you're in your semester, be thinking about if there's somebody who's like a Christian in church history that you could share with us again and come back on the show. We would love it. That would be so neat, because I know there's a lot of believers in our own country's history, not church history, American history. I'm sorry, in American history. That would be super cool to hear about if you can I know it's hard to throw them into an hour with us, but
No,
we're
I
flexible.
do. Oh yeah. No, I would be honored. Thank you. Seriously,
You might
anytime.
be reoccurring. You might have to be a reoccurring guest. I might keep bugging you because I know you got a lot of people. You got so many people in there that you could tell us about.
I will just regurgitate all of it everywhere and everyone. So no, I would be so happy to do that, seriously. And maybe when you come to Montana, we could do one together live for everybody,
Two people in the same room. That's so exciting.
Yay! So yeah, definitely. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you so much for coming on with us. And like I said, I'll send you the link. I'm going to just pray for Jazz. And while I'm praying, if anybody has any questions for Jazz before we end, if you want to put it in the comments. Pastor Ron says, thank you. This was informative and inspiring.
Thank you, sir.
In Michigan, I think.
Okay, awesome.
We have like over 500 people in the group now. So we're not everybody is. But it's really fun. And yeah, definitely check out Jazz's The Woman Worth Knowing podcast, whether you're a guy or girl. It's just faith stories of faith walks. It's so wonderful. It's so encouraging. Yeah. One of my favorite podcasts. I absolutely love it. And hopefully maybe you can continue with the podcast and just do like people worth knowing and just do different people or something. But we'll just have you. I'll have you back on here. So
I would love to. That's good. It's an outlet. I need an outlet. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. But I'll definitely let's go ahead and pray and just thank you again for coming on, and we'll have to catch up soon.
Yes,
like on time or something too. Catch up more.
Oh yeah, totally. All these people having to listen to. Remember Jen, that guy? Yeah.
Remember that one time? This is all like most of the people because I'm running the podcast, so I'm like. I kind of came up with it because I'm like, I know all these really cool people I would love for this group to hear from. But half of the first is like, remember the one time we did the one? Oh, yeah. So I have to remember there's other people watching.
Yeah, totally.
So, anyway. Okay. Lord, thank you so much for this time and just for friends from long ago, Lord. I just pray for Jazz that you would just help her as she prepares for this class on U.S. history. I pray that you would just help her have those insights into examples of people that just really had massive impact, so much like the Booths as well, Lord. And we just pray that you would help us remember that we still serve the same great God that these different people have served, and that you can do these mighty things in and through us as we surrender more and more to you, God. I just pray that you would help her in her move, her class preparation, and also her sweet time with her sweet family, Lord. And that you would I know moving can be stressful, just that you would help her as she's packing and sorting and all that kind of stuff. And we just thank you for her and thank you for her just amazing intellect you've given her and her ability to just really share people's stories and faith walks with other people and how inspiring it is. And I just pray that you would just bless her in this transition time and help her just draw even closer into your arms, Lord. And yes, we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Oh, amen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, people are just saying thank you. I was trying to read. I'm so blind without my glasses. I'm like, what are they saying in the
it's way up in the screen.
Huge. It's my huge tablet. It's not even my phone. I'm like, still.
Oh my gosh. Jen, I love you.
I'm getting old.
Oh, that's so funny. No, but it was just funny because I opened my eyes and it was your forehead. I'm like, hi.
Cass says, amen. Thank you for sharing with us. Cass is one of our leadership team.
My pleasure.
Shireen, I think is how you say her name. Shireen. Cass has her glasses emoji on there.
Yes.
Yeah, I think
nerd.
Really good. After we end, I'm going to I need to post your link to your podcast as well. But I'll probably head to bed like 10:30 here.
Okay, yeah, you're like
still a night owl, though. You know me. I'm still as much.
Yes, you are. Yes. See that? It's hardwired.
It's hardwired, exactly. Anyway, love you, my friend. And if you guys have any questions for Jazz, she's in the room. I mean, she's in the group still, so you can always post, and maybe she'll post with her. She can answer you. Bye.
Yes. Mwah. Love you. Okay.